previous Next Lightning talk about contributing to core without losing your mind, and this is just a collection of thoughts that I've put together around the way I contribute to core, and so your mileage may vary, but these are things that I've sort of accumulated over time, and they're random threads that I've tied together into a presentation and proposed for Drupal South in Melbourne. So yeah, this is just a preview of that and some of the things I've learned along the way. So first of all, negotiating issue queues. You can't really contribute to core if you're not getting involved in the issues, and from a personal experience, I first started by following issues, and so any issue that you go to, you can click follow, and then you can go in and update your email settings. So you go to a list of issues and you say issues you follow, and then you get an email for every comment on those issues that you follow, and obviously that can be verbose, so it's worth putting an email filter on in your email program to put those into a separate folder so that they're not clogging up your inbox. And then from there, I think the next best step is to watch and observe for a while and get to know the characters and get to know the people and the personalities and the process in particular. So you know, the way issues move from their inception through the pipeline to being committed, and just watch the way people interact with each other and just absorb that. And I think that you can't understate what's involved there, because commonly some people will post something in the issue queue and annoy people from the first onset because they've not done it the right way, or they might not have the confidence to say what they think, and they actually are well within their place to do so. So I think, yeah, just watching the dynamics of the group and of the contributors and learning a little bit about the way they interact is a good first step. And so that can take, I think I watched for a couple of months before I actually started working on things. And there's nothing compelling you to get involved, but yeah, watching from the outside is a good start. So after that, it's about finding your niche, and most people, a lot of people working core, they work on scratching an itch, so it's something that they're particularly interested in, something that they're passionate about or motivates them. But sometimes it's born out of annoyance, and I know that a lot of the work that I've done in Drupal 8 is born out of things that annoy me in my day job, particularly in the whole blocks space and the beans and deploying all that config type stuff is something we bang our heads against constantly in Drupal 7, and that was my driver to get involved in the block content module in core. And so, all of those pain points, I'm happy with the way they've turned out. They might annoy someone else in the future, but yeah, I'm kind of finding what annoys me. You might want to find something that you care about. So you might have a particular module that you like in Contrib, and it has issues with core APIs, and you think that you can resolve them by contributing to core, and so that's your that's your niche. But you might also find something that no one cares about, and that is how I got started in core, by taking on the forum module, because no one cared about that. And yeah, it's kind of gone from, like, book module being the ugly stepchild of core, forum and book module in Drupal 8 are some of the modernist modules that we have. And yeah, so if you're looking for your niche, it might just actually be something that no one else wants. And yeah, that might be your foot in. But the moral of the story is find something and use the tools to find them. So if you search for issues in the issue queue, there's a quite advanced search. You can search on many different facets, but at the very bottom there's an RSS icon, subscribe with RSS, and the follow works great if you're trying to track existing issues, the follow button on the first set of slides, but it doesn't help you with finding new issues. And so if you have an RSS reader, subscribing to an RSS feed with particular search parameters, you can get notification of new issues that come in. So for example, I watched forum module and I watch Drupal 8 core, and yeah, that's how you find you're find the next itch to scratch when you've finished the previous one. So Git and patch workflows are a major part of not losing your mind in core. We still use a patch-based workflow, and I'm not going to get into the argy-bargy over whether pull requests are better than patch workflow, but we have a patch workflow, and we have to make the best of what we've got. And so My tip is to use one branch per issue. So on my local machine here, I've got 157 branches of Drupal core, one for each issue. And obviously I've worked on more issues than that, and so this is all that's on this machine, but I find having one branch per issue makes it a lot easier to track where you're up to and a lot easier to switch context between multiple issues. And a lot of our handbook documentation focus on checking out a patch and applying it to 8.0x and then resetting the patch and blowing away what you've done once, resetting the branch and blowing away what you've done when you go and put your patch up. But I would advocate commit your patches locally. We have Git, we should use it. So this screenshot shows me working on the REST relation domain issue, and you can see there I've got patch 7, new patch, fixes, and I've worked my way through various iterations of it, including merging as we go. And then if I wanted to switch to work on another issue, I don't need to reapply my patch from the previous issue, it's already there. Or if I need to re-roll it, it's already there. I just have to merge it against 8.0.x and create a new patch. And so everything is much easier if you're using Git. If you've got the patches you've previously applied committed, then you can just use git diff to get your interdiff. And you should be using an interdiff because people who come along and help review your code don't want to have to start from scratch every time you put a new patch up. And so if you've got a massive patch and you've only changed one thing, putting an interdiff up means they can just review a couple of lines and know that, oh yeah, you've done what you said you would, and you know the review runs a lot smoother. With Git, you can get a reroll quite simply by fetching the origin and merging. And there'll be conflicts. There's always conflicts with a code base moving so fast, but because you're using it in the context of Git, you're not trying to manually apply a patch. You're actually given the hunks and you can edit them like any other merge conflict. And look, the fact is that a lot of patches won't apply if you're re-rolling someone else's patch, and so by taking your local branch back to the point when it did apply, and you can find the commit hash in the testbot log, and applying the patch to that point, you can then merge against 8x and resolve the conflicts just like you would with any other Git workflow. Patches are easy, you just get a diff against the head, and you can apply in one line with using curl in the pipe. So yeah, if without Git, I think that you could quickly go mad, but without one advantage that the patch workflow has over the branch and pull request workflow is magic fairies in the night, but I'll come to that later. So one of the big things to negotiate working with core is dealing with the politics and personalities. And there are a lot of people that are heavily invested in Drupal core, both emotionally and financially. There are a lot of people who make their living out of Drupal core. There are a lot of people who plan to make their future living out of it. And there's obviously organisational considerations. Some people have got driving factors from the organisation behind them. Some people have spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years of their life working on core, and so they're genuinely emotionally invested in the software, but also in the community. And I'm not going to lie, egos are big. There are clashes. There are places where people say there's a bit of get off my lawn type argy-bargy from time to time, but we have code of conduct for that. And I think that if you're starting out developing, contributing to core, to be aware of the fact that these things might happen. I'm not going to be naive and paint it all rosy, but also be aware of where the boundaries are, and don't be tempted to cross those boundaries yourself, but also be tempted to call out, don't be afraid to call out people who do cross those boundaries. And there is a code of conduct for that reason, and that's there to help us deal with these kind of conflicts that can occur. The stakes are high, as I said. People are heavily invested emotionally and financially, and so sometimes emotion can overrun. And in those cases, the same rule applies for pretty much everyone on the internet. Don't feed the trolls, and you will find people who just, out of frustration, will post something, and it's not negative. It's not positive at all. It's just purely negative, and just don't buy into it. And don't get drawn into the Cartman drama triangle. And this is a psychology concept that relates to a drama triangle, and it actually has a name, and you can look it up on Wikipedia. But essentially, there's 3 roles in the drama triangle. There's the victim, there's the aggressor, and there's the rescuer. And don't play any of those 3 roles because you're just feeding that cycle. And Yeah, even you might think you're doing the right thing by being the rescuer, you're actually just playing into that spiral. So when you see those roles being cast, or people stepping into those roles, or you feel that you might be stepping into any of those three roles, just take a step back and don't. And the queues work a lot smoother that way. But always ask questions when you're unsure. If you think someone's said something derogatory or said something that steps over the line, ask for clarification, seek clarification, both on the technical ground, but also on purely personal opinions of code. And real-time communications are far better than issue queues. It's much easier to solve these things in person on IRC. So, if there is something where there's to and fro happening in the issue queue, jump online, find the person, talk to them, introduce yourself if you haven't met them before. There's people behind these comments, and IRC certainly enforces that the human aspect, whereas the issue queue can end up in, like so many other online comments and forums, into deteriorating into the worst forms of human human behaviour. And don't forget language barriers. Sometimes what you think might be okay in our dialect or in our nomenclature, particularly in we have quite a relaxed Australian way of slang, might be taken out of context elsewhere. For example, the use of the phrase "guys" is fairly common in Australia as a non-gender term, but in other places it's offensive. And also sometimes people might not mean to be gruff about something they're saying. It just might be that the language barrier comes across as though they're being short, or they're being, they're not being rude, but it just comes across that way because of the language barrier. So always seek clarification there. This is kind of my biggest piece of advice for working in core, is to not sweat the details. So if you patch it, they will come. And you say, what will come? Well, reviewers will come, feedback will come, learning will come, core commit counts will come. If you love your patch, put it up there and set it free. Yeah, and this is one of the most disenchanting aspects of core development, is that you put up a patch but you don't get any feedback, and this is where people skills come into it. You need to find someone for a review trade, and everyone has a pet issue that they're working on. Everyone has something that they want someone else to review, and so if you jump online in IRC and ask for a review trade, you might have to ask a few times, but it won't take long for you to find someone who has a pet project that they want reviewed, and you do a review trade. And there are some people that will hold off their review until you've actually done your half of it, but most people by and large take it on trust value. And yeah, I mean, a broken patch is better than none. So if you've been working on something and you don't want to put it up because you're not finished, you're better off to put it up. And as I said, if you patch it, things will come. Someone will come along and push it the next bit that needs to be done. Someone will come along and review it. And this brings us to magic fairies in the night. We are lucky in that we have time zone difference. This is one of the few places where time zones work in our favour, but some people in the Northern Hemisphere refer to us down here as magic fairies in the night, but the converse applies. And this is where pull request workflow with permissions can be problematic. But if you put a patch up before you end for the day, or when you're working on something in the afternoon, and you go to bed that night, someone else might push it that next little bit that needs to be done overnight, and by the time you wake up in the morning, magic fairies have moved your patch from incomplete to ready for review. So yeah, a broken patch is better than none, and if you've got something partially done, even if you're not finished, put up what you've done, list what needs to be done, and you never know, when you wake up the next morning, someone else might have finished it off. And this kind of brings us to development approaches, and there's a post by web chick Angie Byron from quite some time ago called A Tale of Two Developers, and it revolves around two characters, Sloppy Sam and Perfectionist Pat. And so Sloppy Sam has an idea for something in core, goes online in IC and says, oh, what do you think of this? And someone says, oh yeah, it's being worked on over here, or so-and-so is interested in that. And so they knock out a rough patch and we put it up on the issue queue, and then they go on back into IRC and say, hey, what do you think of this? And someone reviews it and trumps up to the top of the latest patches in Drupal issue queue, and someone who just spends their time reviewing might find it and review it and provide feedback, and then 3 or 4 more iterations might occur. Someone might work on it in the night, and over a process of several iterations, Sloppy Sam's patch ends up in core. And through that process, Sloppy Sam's learnt from the experts that we have in our community, and they've learnt who the people are. They've built up karma by interacting with these people. They've got their name out there. And then the alternate approach that Angie talks about is Perfectionist Pat. So Perfectionist Pat goes off in isolation, spends 3 weeks planning the patch, writes the code, works on it so that it passes coding standards on it, works so that it passes tests, writes a detailed issue summary, puts the issue up. But in that time, Sloppy Sam's patch has gone through 3 or 4 iterations and been committed, and Perfectionist Pat's patch is closed as a duplicate, and he hasn't had that interaction with the community, and he hasn't had that building of karma or the building of his profile. So yeah, wherever possible, put up whatever you've done and work with the people and work with the experts that we have in our community to build the relationships with them, but also further your knowledge of core. And this brings us to learning through reviews. And yeah, core is vast, and you can't know all of it. Like seriously, there is so much code in Drupal core now that there would be very few people that could put their hand on their heart and say they knew every corner of it. And so reviewers teach people as they review. You put up your patch and you do what you think is right, and someone who knows that as a subject matter expert in that will come along and say, you should be using this API, or you should use this function, or we're not doing that anymore, use this instead. And so through that process, you learn about the areas that you don't know in core. But reviewers learn as they go as well. And so if you're looking to expand your knowledge of core, spending time reviewing other people's code is a great way to do that, because you can see from these people who know particular areas the way things work or the way they want them to work, and through that process you develop your knowledge of core. You get to explore new areas as well as a reviewer. So you might not know anything about the serializer module, but you might not even be interested in it, but you might want to learn, and so you see a patch in that module, and just reviewing it will help you explore new areas, and you might find other parts of core that you didn't know existed. And you might learn new techniques as a reviewee. So if you've put up something and an expert comes along who reviews it and says, use this instead, you might not have even known about that, and that might expand your horizons in terms of your knowledge both of Drupal core, but also in your day job, and also as a programmer in general. And I've said this before, but essentially Drupal core gives you the opportunity to get a free computer science education from the experts that we have in our community. So I've got quite a bit more to go, as you can see from the progress bar, but cutting these to 15 minutes, and so that's a preview of what I'm going to what I propose to talk about in Drupal South in Melbourne. So if you want to see the rest of it, please leave a comment on the proposal, and thanks for your time. We'll go to questions.
I've got a question, Lee. So, is it acceptable to? You mentioned before about just getting up your work in progress. Is it acceptable to sort of do that? Like if you're working on an issue and you might have done a part of it which you're aware of and capable of doing, but there's another part which you're sort of having some trouble with. Is it okay to put the patch, like a patch up that's like half of what you've done so far, so other people can sort of help out, or is it better to sort of?
No, completely. And Gibran will attest to this, that it's quite common that even the experts in, or the people considered as experts in our community, will do the same. They realise that the vast sum of knowledge required is great, and they'll put up, okay, I've done this bit, but I need someone else to work this bit out, and someone else will pick it up. And if they know who that person might be that knows that, they actually go online and ask them, hey, can you have a look at this for me? I need this, and I know that it's in this area, but I don't know exactly what it is, so can you have a look and push it along? And people will willingly do that, they don't get drawn into the belief that you have to put up the complete patch and it's done as a solo effort. It's a community effort, it's done for collaboration, and yeah, there are people that can help you. And then when they do put up that patch, obviously you can learn from that.
Cool.
All right. Is there any other questions? All right. Thank you. I'll stop the broadcast.